The sky was blue and clear on New Eden that morning. Jack Miller wiped sweat from his forehead as he checked the soil moisture sensors in the eastern field. 6 years of hard work had turned this plot of land into a thriving farm. Nearby, the early wheat crop swayed in the gentle breeze, almost ready for harvest. "Jack, lunch is ready," Susan Miller called from the porch of their modest home. Her blonde hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the practical clothing of a frontier scientist. Jack smiled at his wife and waved. They had left Earth together looking for a simpler life. Both were in their mid-30s college sweethearts who had grown tired of Earth's crowded cities and endless bureaucracy. New Eden was supposed to be their fresh start. The colony was small, just a few thousand people spread across a continent of untouched forests and plains. "Coming," he shouted back, picking up his tools. That's when he noticed the shadow. At first he thought it was just a cloud passing over the sun, but the shadow grew darker and larger. Jack looked up. The ship was massive. It blocked out the sun entirely, casting their farm into an eerie twilight. Jack had never seen anything like it before. The vessel was sleek and angular, with a metallic blue-black hull that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It was at least a mile long, hovering silently above their farm. "Susan!" Jack dropped his tools and ran toward the house. "Get inside!" Susan stood frozen on the porch, staring up at the ship. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely audible, over the sudden high-pitched whine that filled the air. Jack never made it to the porch. A beam of pale blue light shot down from the ship, enveloping him. He felt his muscles seize up, his body suddenly weightless. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Susan, caught in another beam, her hand reaching desperately toward him. When Jack woke up, he was in a cell. The walls were smooth and seemed to glow with a faint internal light. The cell was small, barely 8 feet square, with nothing but a hard platform that served as a bed. The air felt thin, making each breath a conscious effort. The light that filled the room pulsed at a frequency that made his eyes water. "Susan?" he called out, his voice hoarse. "Susan?" There was no answer. Jack tried to stand but felt dizzy and weak. The gravity was slightly stronger than what he was used to, making every movement an effort. He was still wearing his work clothes, now stained with sweat and dirt. A section of the wall suddenly became transparent, like a window appearing out of nowhere. Through it, Jack could see another cell, identical to his. Susan sat on the edge of the platform bed, her head in her hands. "Susan!" Jack pressed against the transparent barrier. She looked up, relief washing over her face when she saw him. She ran to her side of the barrier and placed her hand against it. Jack matched his hand to hers, the barrier between them cold to the touch. "Are you hurt?" he asked, studying her face for any signs of injury. She shook her head. "Just scared." "Do you know who they are?" Before Jack could answer, the transparent section turned opaque again, cutting off their connection. Jack pounded on the wall in frustration. "They are the Azurian Empire," a voice said from behind him. Jack spun around to see a tall, humanoid figure standing in his cell. The wall had opened silently to admit the visitor. The alien was nearly 8 feet tall, with iridescent blue scales covering its body. It had 4 arms and a narrow face with large, pupilless eyes. It wore an elaborate uniform of metallic fabric that shifted colors in the light. "I am Admiral Vex's Tor," the alien said. Its mouth didn't move in sync with the words. Jack realized he was hearing a translation. "You and your mate have trespassed on Azurian space." "We didn't know," Jack said, backing away until he hit the wall. "We're peaceful colonists. The Earth government said this planet was unclaimed." The Admiral made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your Earth government is young and ignorant. This sector has belonged to the Azurian Empire for 10,000 years. "Then let us go," Jack pleaded. "We'll leave. All the colonists will leave." Vextor's eyes narrowed. "It is too late for that. Your species needs to learn its place in the galactic order. You and your mate will help teach them that lesson." The Admiral gestured with one of his lower arms, and the wall became transparent again. Jack could see Susan's cell, but now there was another Azurian with her. This one wore a white covering and was holding some kind of device near Susan's head. Her face was contorted in pain. "Stop it!" Jack shouted, throwing himself against the barrier. "Leave her alone." "Her suffering will end when you answer my questions," Vexator said calmly. "Tell me about Earth's defense systems. How many warships do you have? What weapons do they carry?" Jack stared at the Admiral in horror. "I don't know anything about that. I'm a farmer, not a soldier." The alien studied him silently. "Everyone knows something, and humans are most cooperative when their mates are in distress." The interrogation lasted for hours. Jack told them everything he knew about Earth, the colonies, the defense systems he'd seen during their journey to New Eden. It wasn't much. He really was just a farmer, but he desperately tried to remember anything that might make them stop hurting Susan. When Vexator finally left, Jack collapsed on the hard bed, exhausted and ashamed. The wall was still transparent, and he could see Susan curled up on her platform, her body shaking with silent sobs. "I'm sorry," he whispered, knowing she couldn't hear him. "I'm so sorry." Over the next few days, the pattern continued. They were fed a tasteless pace that kept them alive but constantly hungry. They were allowed to see each other but never to touch or speak. The interrogations grew more intense, more painful. On the 5th day, Jack noticed something. During one of the IDIM, brief periods when they could see each other, Susan held up 3 fingers, then tapped her wrist. At first he didn't understand, but she repeated the gesture when the guards weren't looking. 3 days. She was telling him something would happen in 3 days. Jack had no idea what she had planned, but for the first time since their capture, he felt a spark of hope. That night, as he lay on his hard bed staring at the ceiling, he made a promise to himself. If they ever got out of this, he would make the Azurians pay for what they had done. He didn't know it then, but deep inside his cells, something ancient was stirring, something that had been dormant in human DNA for millennia. The constant stress, the pain, the fear for Susan's life. It was triggering changes on a molecular level, changes that would soon show the Azurian Empire exactly what they had awakened. 3 days passed, but nothing changed. Jack worried that he had misunderstood Susan's signal. The interrogations continued, growing more intense each time. The Azurians seemed fascinated by human pain responses, recording everything with clinical precision. On the 7th day of their captivity, Jack was taken to a different room. This one was larger, filled with strange equipment. A female Azurian waited for him, her scales a lighter blue than Admiral Vexator's. "I am Dr. Zilara," she said, examining Jack like he was an interesting specimen. "Chief scientist of the Void Sovereign." Jack said nothing. He had learned that speaking without being asked a direct question often led to punishment. "Your species is unusual," Dr. Zilara continued, circling him slowly. "Most life forms we encounter are simple to categorize, simple to break. Humans are different." She pressed a device against Jack's arm. He felt a sharp sting as it took a blood sample. "Do you know that your cells contain dormant genetic sequences?" she asked, placing the sample in a machine. "Sequences that have no apparent purpose?" Jack shook his head. He didn't understand what she was talking about, but he felt a strange chill at her words. "They activate under extreme stress," Dr. Zilara said, studying the readout from the machine. "We've observed minor activation in both you and your mate." "Fascinating." "Where is Susan?" Jack asked, breaking his silence. "Is she okay?" Dr. Zilara made a dismissive gesture. "The female is being studied by my colleagues. She is proving quite resilient." A screen on the wall lit up, showing Susan in another lab. She was strapped to a table, electrodes attached to her temples. Her face was pale, but her eyes were open, alert and defiant. "What are you doing to her?" Jack lunged forward but was immediately restrained by 2 guards who had been standing silently behind him. "We are learning," Dr. Zilara said simply. "Your mate's brain activity is unusual. When we cause her pain, her focus doesn't fragment as expected. Instead, it sharpens, as does yours." Jack struggled against the guards, but their grip was like iron. Dr. Silara watched his reaction with detached interest. Most species turn on each other under sufficient pressure, she said. Sacrifice their mates to save themselves. Humans seem to do the opposite. You grow more protective, more determined. It is inefficient but intriguing. She nodded to the guards, who forced Jack onto an examination table and secured him with metal restraints. Today we will test the limits of these dormant sequences, Dr. Zylara said, preparing a syringe filled with glowing blue liquid. This stimulant will simulate near-death stress. We want to see how far the activation will progress. Jack tried to struggle, but the restraints held firm. As the needle pierced his skin, burning pain spread through his veins. His vision blurred, and he could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears, growing faster and faster. Through the haze of pain, he saw Susan on the screen. She was watching him, her eyes wide with fear. But there was something else in her expression, determination. She mouthed something that looked like, "Hold on." The pain peaked, and Jack's back arched off the table. He could feel something changing. Inside him, his cells burning with energy. For a moment, he thought he was dying, then suddenly clarity. The pain was still there, but distant, as if happening to someone else. Jack could see every detail of the lab with perfect sharpness. He could hear Dr. Zylara's 3 hearts beating, could smell the chemical makeup of the air. Most strangely, he could somehow sense Susan's presence, not just see her on the screen, but feel her consciousness reaching out to his. Jack. Her voice whispered in his mind. "Can you hear me? Susan?" He thought back, astonished. How is this possible? I don't know. Her thoughts came back. It started yesterday during their tests. Whatever they're doing to us, it's changing something, waking something up. Dr. Zylara was checking his vital signs, unaware of the silent conversation. Extraordinary, she murmured. The sequences are at 40% activation, far beyond what we've seen before. We need to be careful, Susan's thoughts continued. Don't let them know. What's happening? Not yet. The mental connection faded as the drugs in Jack's system began to wear off. Dr. Zylara made notes on her device, then ordered the guards to return him to his cell. That night, lying on his hard bed, Jack reached out with his mind, trying to find Susan again. For a long time there was nothing. Then faintly, he felt her presence. I'm here, she thought to him. It's harder without their drugs, but I can still feel you. What's happening to us? Jack asked. I've been listening to the scientists when they think I'm unconscious, Susan explained. They believe humans carry modified DNA from some ancient race, something that's been dormant for thousands of years. And their tests are activating it? Yes. The Azurians are documenting everything, but they don't understand what they're seeing. They think it's just an interesting biological reaction, not what it's becoming. Jack focused, trying to strengthen their connection. What is it? Becoming? I'm not sure, Susan admitted. But I'm starting to be able to do things. Small things. I can sense the ship around us. I can feel the minds of the Azurians nearby. Jack tried to extend his awareness beyond their cells. At first, there was nothing. Then, slowly, he began to sense the vast structure of the ship around them. He could feel energy flowing through conduits in the walls, could sense the presence of Azurian minds all around them, thousands of them. I can feel it too, he told Susan. But what good does it do us? We're still trapped. For now, Susan agreed. But they're planning something. I overheard Vextor talking to the Emperor. They're going to execute us soon, broadcast it as a warning to the other human colonies. Jack felt a cold fear at her words, but also a strange calm. Then we don't have much time. No. Susan's thoughts came back stronger now. But I think that might be exactly what we need. The scientists keep saying the activation happens most strongly under extreme stress. You're saying we need to let them kill us? Jack asked, incredulous. I'm saying death might not be the end for us anymore, Susan replied. Not with what's awakening inside us. Jack considered this. It seemed impossible, yet he could feel the truth of it in the changes already happening within his body. If you're right, he said finally, what do we do after? Susan's answer came with grim determination. We show the Azurian Empire exactly what they've awakened. The next day, guards came for both Jack and Susan. They were taken to a large chamber where Admiral Vextor waited with Dr. Zylara and several other high-ranking Azurians. The room was circular, with a raised platform in the center and tiered seating around the edges. The Emperor has made his decision, Admiral Vextor announced. You will be executed tomorrow. The event will be broadcast to all human colonies as a demonstration of the consequences of trespassing in Azurian space. Jack glanced at Susan. Her face was calm, too calm for someone who had just been sentenced to death. Through their mental link, he could feel her focused concentration. Remember, her thoughts came to him. Whatever happens, wait 20 minutes after. After we die? Jack thought back, still finding the idea impossible to accept. After we die, she confirmed. That's how long it will take. Dr. Zylara approached them with a scanning device. Fascinating, she said, studying the readings. The dormant sequences in both subjects are now at 72% activation. The impending execution seems to be accelerating the process. Is there any danger? Vextor asked, looking concerned for the first time. The scientist made a dismissive gesture. None. The sequences appear to be merely a stress response. Once they are dead, the activation will cease. She's wrong. Susan's thoughts whispered to Jack. I've been inside the ship's systems. I found records of another species with similar sequences. Death doesn't stop the activation, it completes it. Before Jack could ask more questions, guards separated them and returned them to their cells. That night, Jack tried to extend his awareness further, testing the strange new abilities that were developing inside him. He found he could sense the ship's power systems, could feel the energy flowing through the massive engines that kept the Void Sovereign moving through space. He reached out to Susan again. How did you get into the ship's systems? I don't know exactly, she admitted. Yesterday during the tests, when they pushed me to the edge of consciousness, I could suddenly feel my mind extending beyond my body. I followed the ship's neural networks like pathways of light. There's so much information, Jack. Can you access it again? He asked. There was a pause then. Yes, I'm getting better at it. The ship has extensive files on hundreds of species. The Azurians have been conquering and experimenting for thousands of years. And they found others like us? Only once. Oh, species called the Ricari. The Azurians drove them to extinction 5,000 years ago. But there were stories. Stories that some Ricari returned after death. Changed. Jack considered this. The Azurians didn't believe it? No. They classified it as primitive superstition, but there were incidents they couldn't explain. Entire ships vanishing, Azurian worlds going dark. And you think the same thing will happen to us? I think, Susan's thoughts came carefully, that whatever ancient race modified human DNA, they also modified the Ricari. We're carrying the same genetic legacy. The night passed slowly. Jack slept fitfully, his dreams filled with strange images, stars seen from impossible perspectives, energy patterns flowing through the fabric of space, and always, Susan's presence beside him, their consciousness growing more intertwined. Morning came. Guards took them to a vast amphitheater at the heart of the ship. Thousands of Azurians filled the tiered seats, all there to witness the execution. Emperor Zorkalax himself sat on an elevated throne, his scales gleaming with an almost purple iridescence that marked him as royalty. Jack and Susan were placed on a central platform, facing the Emperor. For the first time since their capture, they were allowed to stand close together. Jack reached for Susan's hand and she squeezed his fingers tightly. Before you die, Emperor Zorkalax said, his translated voice booming through the chamber, know that your deaths will serve the greater order of the galaxy. Your species will learn humility, or face extinction. Admiral Vexator stepped forward with a small device in one of his 4 hands. This field will accelerate cellular breakdown while maintaining consciousness. Your suffering will be brief but educational for your species. Jack looked at Susan. Her eyes were focused and clear. I love you, he thought to her. I love you. Too, she replied. Remember, 20 minutes. Vextor activated the device. A shimmering field surrounded Jack and Susan. At first there was no pain, just a strange tingling sensation. Then it began. Jack felt his cells start to break down, a burning sensation that quickly became agonizing. He heard Susan scream beside him, felt her hand convulsing in his. Through the pain, Jack reached for their mental connection. Susan was there, her consciousness still linked with his despite their disintegrating bodies. Together, they focused on the strange, dormant sequences in their cells, now fully awakening under the ultimate stress of death. Jack felt his physical body fail. His heart stopped, his brain shut down, and yet, somehow, his consciousness remained. He was aware of the Azurians watching, of Susan beside him, of their bodies now reduced to piles of ash on the platform. In this new, bodiless state, Jack felt his awareness expanding exponentially. He could see energy patterns he had never noticed, before could perceive dimensions beyond the physical. Susan's consciousness was there with him, no longer confined to a separate body, but merged with his in this new state of being. They watched as the Azurians celebrated their deaths. Emperor Zorkalax made a speech about the inevitable domination of superior species in the galaxy. Admiral Vextor ordered the ashes of the humans to be disposed of in the waste reclamation system. No one noticed the strange patterns of energy gathering where the bodies had been. No one saw the subtle disturbances in the ship's power grid as the execution chamber emptied. Jack and Susan waited, their consciousness expanding further with each passing minute. They could now perceive the entire ship, every room, every Azurian on board. They could see the coded patterns of the ship's computer systems, could understand them as easily as breathing. 17 minutes after their deaths, they began to gather energy from the ship's systems, pulling it into the patterns of what had once been their bodies. 19 minutes after their deaths, they had created new forms for themselves, not of flesh and blood, but of energy and will. 20 minutes after their deaths, Jack and Susan Miller returned. The lights throughout the Void Sovereign flickered and died. Emergency systems failed. In the darkness, 2 glowing figures took shape, human in appearance but radiating an inner light that pulsed like heartbeats. The transformation was complete. And now, it was time for the Azurian Empire to learn what they had awakened. Alarms blared throughout the Void Sovereign as backup systems struggled to come online. Red emergency lights cast eerie shadows down the long corridors of the massive ship. Azurian crew members rushed in confusion, their disciplined order breaking down in the unexpected crisis. In the execution chamber, now empty except for 2 guards, the air shimmered with energy. The guards raised their weapons as 2 glowing figures materialized before them. Jack and Susan Miller stood hand in hand, but they were fundamentally changed. Their bodies appeared human in shape but seemed to be made of luminous energy that pulsed with a soft blue light. Their eyes held the darkness of deep space, flecked with pinpoints of light like distant stars. One guard fired his weapon. The energy blast passed straight through Jack's chest without effect. He looked down at the harmless wound, then back at the guard. With a gentle motion of his hand, Jack sent both guards flying across the room. They hit the wall and slumped unconscious. To the floor. "We need to move quickly," Susan said, her voice carrying strange harmonic overtones. "They'll try to lock down the ship." Jack nodded. He could feel Susan's thoughts intertwined with his own, their consciousness partly merged in their new state. Together they stepped forward, passing through the solid metal door of the execution chamber as if it were mist. In the ship's command center, Admiral Vextor was receiving frantic reports from all sections of the vessel. "Main power is still offline," an officer reported. "Engineering teams cannot locate the source of the failure." Security teams are not responding on decks 7 through 12, another added. Vextor slammed 2 of his 4 fists on the command console. That's impossible. Find out what's happening. The Admiral's personal communicator chimed. It was Dr. C. Lara, her voice tight with fear. Admiral, the human subjects, their remains are gone. What do you mean, gone? Vextor demanded. They were reduced to ash. The ash itself has vanished, the scientist said. And the monitoring equipment recorded a massive energy surge in the chamber 20 minutes after termination. Vexator felt a cold sensation run down his spine, something he had not experienced since he was a hatchling. Lock down the science section, he ordered, and get me the Emperor's security detail. Before the communication could go through, the doors to the command center slid open. Every Azurian turned to see Jack and Susan standing in the entrance, their glowing forms casting the room in an ethereal blue light. Admiral Vextor, Jack said, his voice calm, yet carrying an undercurrent of power that made the air itself vibrate. We need to have a conversation. Guards rushed forward with weapons drawn. Susan made a small gesture and the weapons crumbled to dust in their hands. Another gesture left the guards frozen in place, unable to move. Jack and Susan walked slowly to the center of the command deck. The officers backed away in fear, some trying unsuccessfully to flee through doors that suddenly wouldn't open. What are you? Vexator asked, his translator struggling to convey the mix of horror and awe in his voice. We are what you made us, Susan answered. What your torture and experiments awakened in us. Jack looked around the command center, his star-filled eyes taking in the advanced technology. With a simple thought, he accessed the ship's main computer, downloading its entire contents into his consciousness in seconds. Your empire has existed for 10,000 years, Jack said. In that time, you've conquered or destroyed hundreds of species. But you've seen something like us before, haven't you, Admiral? Vextor's scales paled to a lighter blue. The Ricari. But they were myths, superstitions. Their so-called returners were never confirmed. Oh, they were real, Susan said, stepping closer to the Admiral. Just as we are real, the same ancient race that modified the Ricari also modified humans, long before our civilization began. They left a gift dormant in our DNA, waiting for the right trigger to awaken it. Jack raised his hand, and a holographic star map appeared above the command console. Your empire, he said, highlighting thousands of worlds in Azurian space. Then, he highlighted Earth and its handful of colonies in another color. And humanity. You thought us weak, primitive, easy to crush beneath your boot. What do you want? Vextor asked, trying to maintain some dignity despite his fear. First, Jack said, we want the Emperor. As if on cue, the doors to the command center opened again. Emperor Zorkalax entered, surrounded by his elite guards. The Emperor's scales shimmered with anger, his tall form towering over even the other Azurians. What is the meaning of this disruption? He demanded, then stopped short at the sight of Jack and Susan. Emperor Zorkalax, Susan said with a small, mocking bow. How kind of you to join us. The Emperor's guards moved to form a protective circle. Around him, their weapons pointed at the glowing humans. Jack made a dismissive gesture, and the guards were gently pushed aside by an invisible force, leaving the Emperor exposed. Impossible, Zorkalax whispered, his royal composure cracking. 20 minutes ago you watched us die, Jack said, stepping toward the Emperor. Now we've returned to deliver a message from humanity. Susan joined him, and together they raised their hands. The Emperor rose into the air, suspended by their combined power. He struggled but could not break free. Please, Zorkalax said, royal dignity forgotten. We can negotiate. Whatever resources you want, whatever worlds. We don't want your worlds, Susan interrupted. We want justice. Jack and Susan's forms glowed brighter, and tendrils of energy extended from their hands, wrapping around the Emperor's head. He screamed as the energy penetrated his mind. We are giving you a gift, Emperor, Jack explained as Zorkalax writhed in the air. The gift of empathy, From now on, you will feel the pain of every being your empire has ever harmed. You will know their fear, their loss, their grief. And you will be unable to hide from it, Susan added. This connection can never be removed, not by any technology your empire possesses. The energy faded, and the Emperor collapsed to the floor, trembling. When he looked up, his eyes had changed. They now held the same star field pattern as Jack and Susan's. "What have you done to me?" he gasped. "We've made you a conduit," Jack said. "The first of many changes coming to your empire." Susan turned to Admiral Vexator and the other officers watching in horror. "Tell your people," she said. "Tell every world in the Azurian Empire. Humanity is not what you thought we were. We are what we were always meant to become." Jack took Susan's hand and their forms began to shimmer. "We'll be watching," he said, "and we won't be the only ones returning." In a flash of blue light, Jack and Susan Miller vanished from the command center, leaving the shaken rulers of the Azurian Empire to face a future suddenly filled with uncertainty and fear. News of what happened on the Void Sovereign spread quickly through the Azurian Empire. At first, the official story claimed it was simply a power failure and system malfunction. But rumors traveled faster than official reports. Crew members spoke of glowing humans who could walk through walls, of an emperor forever changed by their touch. 1 month after Jack and Susan's transformation, the Azurian fleet that had been heading toward human colonies suddenly changed course. The planned invasion was called off without explanation. On worlds across the Empire, Azurians watched in confusion as their military forces began to withdraw from occupied territories. Emperor Zorkalax, once feared for his cruelty, now rarely appeared in public. When he did, observers noted his haunted expression and the strange darkness in his eyes. He issued decree after decree, ending centuries of oppressive policies. The emperor who had once ordered the destruction of entire worlds now spoke of peace and reconciliation. On the frontier world of New Eden, the colonists who had feared Azurian invasion were surprised when a small diplomatic vessel appeared in orbit instead. The Azurian ambassador delivered a formal apology and offered reparations for the abduction of 2 of their citizens. "What happened to Jack and Susan Miller?" the colony governor asked. The ambassador's scales paled. "They are no longer with us," he said carefully. "Nor are they with you. They have become something else entirely." Far from both human and Azurian space, on a small, uninhabited planet with 2 moons, Jack and Susan had created their new home. They no longer needed ships to travel between worlds. Their transformed bodies could move through space itself, crossing vast distances in moments by following pathways of energy invisible to normal eyes. Their dwelling was a simple structure of stone and wood, built by manipulating matter with their minds. They could have created something far grander with their new abilities, but they chose simplicity. It reminded them of their farmhouse on New Eden, of the life they had once planned together. "More are coming," Susan said, looking up at the night sky. Her form glowed softly in the darkness, illuminating the garden they had planted around their home. They didn't need to eat anymore, but growing things gave them joy. Jack nodded. He could sense them too, other humans who had undergone the same transformation. 3 from the mining colony on Proxima B. The Azurians rated them last. Year. "And 1 from Earth," Susan added. "A scientist who died in an accident. The sequence activated on its own. In the 3 months since their transformation, they had discovered that the dormant genetic sequence could be triggered in different ways. The Azurians' torture had activated it in them, but strong emotional states or certain types of energy could trigger it in others. Once one human underwent the change, it somehow resonated with the dormant sequences in others nearby, making future transformations more likely. "Do you ever regret it?" Jack asked, taking Susan's glowing hand in his own. "What we've become?" Susan was quiet for a moment. "I miss some things," she admitted. "The taste of food, the feeling of rain on my skin. But we've gained so much more than we lost." Their consciousness had expanded beyond what any human had experienced before. They could perceive the fabric of space-time itself, could see the intricate energy patterns that connected all living things. They no longer feared death or aging. Their new forms would last for thousands of years, perhaps longer. The Azurians are afraid, Jack said. They believe we're planning revenge, aren't we? Susan asked with a small smile. Just not the kind they expect. Their plan was not to destroy the Azurian Empire, but to transform it. The Emperor, forever linked to the suffering his people had caused, was already changing policies, ending centuries of conquest and oppression. It was a start, but only that. The others will be here soon, Jack said, sensing the approach of the newly transformed humans. We should prepare them for what comes next. They had discovered records in the ship's computers about other species with similar genetic modifications. Some had disappeared from the galaxy entirely. Others had evolved into beings of pure energy, leaving the physical realm behind. The Vrikari, whose DNA had been modified like humanity's, had vanished 5,000 years ago after their conflict with the Azurians. But Jack and Susan had chosen a different path. They would remain connected to humanity, guiding their species as more and more humans underwent the transformation. Not forcing it, but ensuring that those who changed understood their new powers and responsibilities. A flash of light in the sky announced the arrival of the first newcomer. A glowing figure descended slowly, its light pulsing with uncertainty and wonder. It was a woman, her form still adjusting to the transformation. "Welcome," Susan called up to her. "You're safe here." The woman landed gently on the ground, looking at her luminous hands in amazement. "What's happening to me?" she asked, her voice carrying the same harmonic overtones as Jack and Susan's. "I was in the mining colony. There was an accident. I died. But you returned," Jack said gently. "As we did. As others will." "My name is Carol," the woman said. "Carol Davis. I was a mineral engineer." "We know," Susan said with a warm smile. "We felt your transformation. That's why we called you here." Two more lights appeared in the sky, the other miners from Proxima B. Soon after, a fourth light joined them, the scientist from Earth. As they gathered on the hillside, Jack stepped forward to address them. "You all have questions," he said, "about what you've become, about why this happened to you. We don't have all the answers yet, but we know this. An ancient race saw potential in humanity long ago. They modified our ancestors, planted the seeds of what we could become. The Azurians awakened those seeds in us," Susan continued. "Through pain and suffering, they triggered a transformation they never understood. Now it's spreading, slowly, carefully, but inevitably." "What are we supposed to do now?" Carol asked, still examining her glowing form with a mixture of wonder and fear. Jack smiled. "First we learn. We explore what we can do, what we've become. Then we decide what humanity will be in this galaxy. Not conquerors like the Azurians. Something new. Something better." As the 5 transformed humans talked through the night, sharing experiences and discoveries, more lights appeared in the distant sky. The transformation was accelerating. Humanity was changing. Across the galaxy, in his palace on the Azurian homeworld, Emperor Zor-Calax looked up at the stars with his changed eyes. He could feel them out there, the humans who had died and returned, and he knew that the age of the Azurian Empire was coming to an end. A new age was beginning. The age of humanity transformed,